In the beginning of this movie, we see three nuns who are extremely thirsty and try all sorts of tricks to quench their thirst. What kind of tricks do they attempt? We will see that as we go along in this video. So let's start the movie. At the beginning of the movie, we see Sister Fernanda who is taking a donkey to the church. Upon reaching the church, she meets Sister Ginevra who asks her, "Where were you last night?" Fernanda says she had gone to catch the donkey that ran away from the church. While they were talking, a gardener passes by and says good morning to them, but in return, the gardener receives curses from the nuns. After this, Ginevra goes to the head sister and requests to be given the responsibility of managing the donkey. Here, we also meet Sister Alexandra, who is sitting quietly on her bed. She is fed up with her life as a nun and wants to leave and live her life outside. At this moment, her father visits her and tells her that he hasn't been able to find a suitor for her because men are demanding too much dowry. She tells her father that if he donates less to the church, they could gather enough money for the dowry, but her father refuses. The next day, the three sisters are carrying knitted clothes when the same creepy gardener passes by again and leers at them. Seeing this, the sisters get angry and beat up the gardener. Meanwhile, Father Tommaso is taking the knitted clothes to sell at the market, and on the way he meets the gardener. The gardener tells him that he will no longer work at the church because the three sisters beat him up and cursed him badly. Father Tommaso requests the gardener to not leave his job, but the gardener is too scared and runs away. On the other hand, we are introduced to Lord Bruno, who is having breakfast with his wife, Francesca. He is telling her about his battles, but Francesca's attention is on their servant, Massetto. Their eyes keep meeting repeatedly. Later that night, we see Francesca and Massetto having an affair. Francesca's husband is unaware that his wife is cheating on him because he is not able to satisfy her needs. Just as they were starting their second round, Lord Bruno arrives unexpectedly. Before he could see who his wife was with, Massetto quickly jumps out of the window and runs away. Lord Bruno chases him to the servants' quarters, where Massetto pretends to be asleep. Lord Bruno touches the chests of all the servants to figure out who was running earlier, but since it's dark, he cannot identify Massetto, so he leaves. Massetto, in order to avoid being caught, cuts off everyone's ponytails in the quarters. The next morning, Lord Bruno gathers all the servants to punish the guilty one, but when he sees that all their ponytails are cut, he fails to recognize the culprit. Thus, Massetto escapes punishment. Meanwhile, Francesca, in her desperation, asks Massetto to bring wood from the forest, but Massetto, fearing for his life, flees to the jungle. As he runs through the forest, he encounters Father Tommaso, who is drunk, and his cart has overturned, with all his clothes flowing away in the river. Massetto helps Tommaso retrieve the clothes, and in return, Father Tommaso offers to take Massetto to the church and gives him advice on how to pretend to be deaf and mute, warning him that if he doesn't, the sisters will torment him. The next morning, Father Tommaso introduces Massetto to the head sister, who, upon Tommaso's request, hires him as a gardener. While working, Sister Fernanda approaches Massetto and asks him who he is. Fernanda is still unaware of Massetto's identity. Soon after, Sister Maria arrives and explains that Massetto is the new gardener and that he is both deaf and mute. Later that night, Sister Fernanda's friend Martha comes to visit, and the two of them go to Alexandra's room, where they begin drinking alcohol. After some time, Ginevra also joins them, and they start talking about intimate topics, with Martha explaining the pleasures of being intimate. They all get drunk, and Ginevra and Fernanda go a step further by getting intimate with each other. The next morning, we see Alexandra approaching Massetto and trying to seduce him. As they get intimate, the church bells ring, and Alexandra leaves. Meanwhile, Ginevra and Fernanda are washing clothes when Alexandra joins them. They talk about the previous night's events, saying it was fun, and then ask Alexandra why her clothes are so dirty. Alexandra lies and says she was helping Massetto dig trenches, which surprises them because they have never seen her work before. One day, Ginevra sees Fernanda and Martha going into the forest and decides to secretly follow them. In the forest, she discovers them making a potion from belladonna leaves, believing it will make men more attracted to them. Martha puts belladonna juice in Fernanda's eyes and cuts her finger to drink her blood. Ginevra, hiding in the bushes, watches this strange ritual. After the ritual, Fernanda and Martha head to Massetto's quarters and engage in a threesome with him. The following day, Bishop arrives at the church to inspect the work, and Father Tommaso, along with Sister Maria, accompanies him. Taking advantage of this, Massetto sneaks into Alexandra's room, where they get intimate. However, they are interrupted by an elderly nun who enters the room, causing Massetto to panic and hide. He nearly escapes when the bishop, Father Tommaso, and Sister Maria enter the room. Massetto hides under the bed, narrowly avoiding being caught again. Meanwhile, Ginevra also starts making her own belladonna, but instead of putting it in her eyes, she drinks it, which drives her into a frenzy. She cuts her hand and smears the blood on her face. Later, Alexandra confronts Massetto and asks why he lied about being deaf and mute. While they are talking, Ginevra enters, still intoxicated from the belladonna. She begins to kiss Massetto, but is interrupted by the sound of Fernanda approaching and quickly hides, meeting Alexandra in the corner. The two are shocked to see each other, and then Fernanda enters with a knife, forcing Massetto into the forest. Ginevra and Alexandra follow Fernanda into the forest, where they witness something that terrifies them. They see a group of naked witches dancing around a fire with Massetto tied up nearby. Realizing that Fernanda and Martha are part of the coven, Ginevra attacks the witches in her belladonna-induced rage. Martha Martha tries to calm her down but is knocked unconscious by Ginevra. Alexandra arrives and stops Fernanda from sacrificing Massetto. Ginevra, covered in blood and still naked, runs back to the church and gathers everyone with her screams. She tells the bishop that Fernanda is a witch. Soon after, Fernanda, Alexandra, and Massetto also arrive. The bishop calls for Sister Maria, but Father Tommaso emerges from her room, leaving everyone shocked. The next morning, the bishop announces their punishments. Father Tommaso is sent to another monastery where only men live, and Massetto is handed over to Lord Bruno, who locks him in a dungeon. The three nuns apologize to each other and admit they miss Massetto. Meanwhile, Lord Bruno visits Massetto in the dungeon and tells him that he has handed over Francesca to the pigs and dogs and that he will torture Massetto. Shortly after, a turtle with a candle on its back enters the dungeon. The turtle is a distraction sent by the three sisters, allowing them to free Massetto. Disguised as soldiers, they help Massetto escape into the forest, where they celebrate their freedom, planning to be intimate together that night. Meanwhile, Sister Maria meets Father Tommaso, and they are overjoyed to see each other. But soon they hear the voices of Massetto and the sisters and hide. The movie ends with them sharing a kiss.